This program is sponsored by Auckland City Council. 185. The number of ethnic groups in Auckland City. 38. The percentage of Auckland residents who were not born in New Zealand. Sri Lankan Independence Day celebrations. New Zealand Sri Lanka Foundation celebrated its 60th Independence Day anniversary, attended by a host of dignitaries. The celebrations were unique, with participants drawn from the Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist and Christian communities, all coming together to form a fusion of cohesiveness and understanding.
Swastira Brahaspatir Om Shanti 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 Adaganesha Adarvashirsham Vyakya Syamaha Om Namaste Ganapadage Tameva Pratyaksham Tattvamasi Tameva Kevalam Dartasi Tameva Kevalam Kartasi Tameva Kevalam Hartasi.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Ameen. Defend, O Allah, this graciously given land from misuse of power, distrust of neighbor and stranger, corruption in commerce and goods, and in the illusion of wealth. Give unto our government a due respect for your sovereign rule over all nations. Enter their hearts that they may govern by compassion for peoples everywhere. We pray for our children, youth and adults, strengthening their wills to have a successful experience and good citizenship.
A place of peace and unity for a Buddhist organisation that seeks peace in the world. So I thought this was a very appropriate venue to have this celebration today of both Sri Lanka's independence and a call for unity among the peoples and diverse faiths of the beautiful island of Sri Lanka. Mr. Masnaika spoke earlier, Madam President, about the joyous occasion of this event, which is independence, which is a joyous occasion for all peoples to seek and find their own destiny and to shrug off colonialism. But again, on behalf of the government and our Prime Minister, Akbar, I wish all of the Sri Lankan community a very joyous occasion. I know we're 2 weeks after the day, but a joyous 60th birthday and a firm, strong desire for peace to come to the beautiful island of Sri Lanka.
Now, Sri Lanka, of course, as we know, has a proud cultural tradition dating back to 2,000 years and so on. Nature has bestowed some real beauty on that island, but that's not what matters today. Today is a day for introspection. Today is a day for reflection rather than celebration. We should try and see what we have achieved in the last 60 years. When we got independence in 1948, we had very high economic, social indicators, comparable with almost any other country. Certainly superior to India, Pakistan, and even Singapore. And we know how. Now, that is what we have started looking at. That's what I say today, reflection rather than celebration. Anybody in the village, anybody in the country from any part, whether it is just like Bolivia or my home, I was in the southern coast, where everybody had a chance of saying, become a doctor, engineer, finance manager, or whatever.
من ثنيات الوداع وجب الشكر علينا ما دعا لله داع وطلع البدر علينا من ثنيات الوداع وجب الشكر علينا ما دعا لله داع Oh, the white moon rose over us from the valley of Wada, and we owe it to show gratefulness where the call is to Allah. طلع البدر علينا من ثنيات الوداع وجب الشكر علينا ما دعا لله داع رسول الله حبيب الله نبي الله شفيع الله رسول الله حبيب الله نبي الله شفيع الله صلى الله على محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم صلى الله على محمد صلى الله
According to the last census, the total Sri Lankan population in New Zealand stood at 8,542 people. The flag hoisting was followed by speeches and a colourful cultural program. Minister of Education and Ethnic Affairs Chris Carter and Sri Lankan High Commissioner in Australia Kusum Balapatabendi, Dr. Gamini Jayasuriya and Honorary Consul for Sri Lanka in New Zealand Aruna Abeygoonesekera spoke on the occasion.
صلى الله على محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم
Sri Lanka is a country that had enormous potential. It's got a very highly skilled and well-educated population, and the conflict in Sri Lanka has been a great barrier to Sri Lanka realising its full potential. The Sri Lankan community here in New Zealand has come together, Tamils, Sinhalese, Muslims, descendants of the Burgher settlers from Portugal and the Netherlands who settled in Sri Lanka. They've all come together today to say, well, we're proud of our country, but we really want to see peace in Sri Lanka. And I think that's an important message.
What is New Zealand's connection with Sri Lanka?
New Zealand has a long connection with Sri Lanka. One of the most interesting is that the fact that my colleague, the Police Minister Annette King, is the great-great-granddaughter of the first Sri Lankan immigrant who came to New Zealand in the 1880s. She's very proud of her Sri Lankan heritage. Many more Sri Lankans have come since her ancestor arrived in New Zealand, so there's the people connection. I think no community has more doctors in New Zealand than the Sri Lankan community, which has been a great asset to our country. Cricket, of course, has been a sport that has brought our two countries together. We've had a long trading relationship. Sri Lanka has been the country that's provided most of the tea that's come to New Zealand, and that's been a really important part of New Zealand's culture for many generations.
What is the present level of contact, and what is New Zealand doing in order to alleviate the problem in Sri Lanka, like how the representation was made by one of the leaders out here?
New Zealand has a keen interest in seeing the peace process have a successful outcome in Sri Lanka. We haven't designated the Tamil Tigers as a terrorist organisation because we believe that we should continue to dialogue to try and bring about peace. We certainly don't support terrorism, but we do support the peace process. At Christmas I had a lunch with the Norwegian Prime Minister along with our Prime Minister Helen Clark. We met in Oslo and we talked about the peace process, because Norway is a country that has been very involved in the peace process in Sri Lanka. So there's the political aspect of the relationship where New Zealand is strongly supporting peace initiatives. We had the terrible tsunami event in Sri Lanka several years ago where New Zealanders gave very generously to try and rebuild Sri Lanka. That's been another event that has bonded our two countries together. Trade is quite small. We have a lot of potential to develop relationships with Sri Lanka, but until peace comes to Sri Lanka, that will be quite difficult to do.
Well, the problem started when the terrorists started working against their own people. If you analyze what they have done more damage to the Tamils than anybody else has done to the Tamils. They have killed the largest number of Tamils in their own country, their own people, and not only the people of our country, but even the Prime Minister of India, Rajiv Gandhi. So this is something that unforgettable. This is unpardonable, because this is a destruction of a nation, destruction of national assets of a country, destruction of the assets of 20 million people in the country. We cannot allow 5,000 terrorists to run the country. We cannot allow the 12% population of Tamils to go under the hammer of the terrorists and suffer. And they also must have a future, and their future generations have to survive. And they have to survive in an atmosphere of harmony and peace. This is exactly what we are trying to do. So while we try to suppress them in one way, the other way we are trying to resolve the conflict.
This program was sponsored by Auckland City Council. 559,700, the predicted population of Auckland City in 2026.